So our topic is, why is there a lack of people of color represented in fantasy film? From past to present, what are your thoughts on that, Mary?
On the spot.
At the risk of sounding apologist, who writes most fantasy fiction? At least in the beginning of the 20th century.
True.
I mean, I wouldn't expect Tolkien to really have cared about any POC characters.
Let's talk about Tolkien.
Oh, do we have to?
Yes,
Oh.
we should. Let's talk about the orcs specifically.
Or even in Narnia. We all know that was a parallel Middle Eastern kind of thing going on there. So, yeah.
Well,
I really don't have much more to say.
well, I think just to add on to that, like taking it all the way back to when you're really little, your first stories are like, I am going out on an adventure. If I am going out on an adventure starts getting you somewhere, really starts resonating with you, and as you grow up and you're never included in any of that world. I mean, through redlining and everywhere else, people were kept incredibly separate. Just through no fault of usually the people being brought up in it, but perpetuated by them. I am going out into the world. Now I'm out writing this book. I'm going to write what I know, the children I knew going out off into the world. They're not going to include the other in that group. Mm-hmm. We have to, and that's not necessarily by design of just the author, but the world they were raised in.
Absolutely.
And noticing that now and taking the time now to kind of forcefully interject ourselves and retell those stories where we can be involved in part of the narrative. I mean, in part of the positive side of the narrative, kind of Chekhoving our way in there. I mean, because Chekhov, his entire thing on the show was, I am here because Russians are supposed to be bad in the world we live in, but in the future, Russians aren't going to be bad.
Wait. Are we differentiating fantasy and sci-fi or no?
Because I think Star Trek runs a little.
Star Trek has magic.
Sci-fi.
Star Trek has magic. Star Trek literally has a god that shows up occasionally and just magics them around.
Okay, that was cute, huh?
Yeah. Sorry, no, once magic's in, it's
Enterlane.
That's true.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess we could honestly say that Star Trek was
For certain
sci-fi
elements.
fantasy in certain parts of it.
Mm-hmm.
But getting back to Tolkien, our lovely author, and his representation. So I had a conversation with someone about this before, about how there were no POCs in Lord of the Rings, right?
I was gonna say there's
and I don't think she realized that the POCs that were represented had tons of makeup and they were all of the bad guys. Dark, insidious style creatures. And I don't know if that was just thoughts on where the world was back then or what, but I mean, I still see that there are shows nowadays where you have representation of like dark elves being the bad guys and everything. And I haven't seen anything where that's changed except for maybe 2 authors that have done something like that.
I think part of Tolkien's issue too was he's pulling from a mythos that is from a Northern European myth, with elves and things. I mean, if you go down towards Africa or the Middle East, where my people are from, we don't really have elves. We don't. That's not part of our myth. We don't have them. So we have Jinn.
Yeah, but you can say
we have. So it's interesting to see, like, you don't see those creatures anywhere. So I think when Tolkien was writing a lot of his stuff, he was pulling from
different mythos.
Different mythos that already did not include people of color.
Well,
So it was, and probably of his time, it was really hard for him to do so. But not making an excuse for him, I'm just saying.
Well, even if that wasn't his thought, if that wasn't his thoughts, right? You still have directors from the early 2000s casting
That is
people
a
of
different whole
color
story. That's a
as
different
the
whole
bad guys. Especially in regular film, if it's not even fantasy, they're the drug addicts or the gangsters or you know, any of the films back in mid 2000s. So you still have to look at that. Has it really changed since then?
Absolutely not. Like the greatest
Okay.
actor of all time, Denzel Washington's performance of Malcolm X was his best role, and he could not get an Oscar until he was a cop doing crack and slapping black women. like, so please tell me about how black people can only be orcs. Like the greatest actor of all time, period, could not get his Oscar until he did crack and slapped a black woman. Until there was a white hero, he could not get an Oscar. So, like, you say early 2000s, but early 2000s might as well be 1950. We didn't start this conversation until we had a paradigm shift in the second term of Obama. When the Tea Partiers had gained so much power that everybody that was just like, nah, it'll be fine, had to stop being, nah, it'll be fine, and try to find their identity. Like, we started this conversation in 2010, or probably started in 2010, really got into it in 2014. We're just now getting there. Like, this is brand new. We're at the beginning of a very long, multi-generational conversation.
Can you think of any newer fantasy film now that represent people of color in a different light?
Definitely don't say Gods of Egypt. Oh, freak A. Oh.
Can we not just talk about that?
But I guess
Having no Middle Eastern person in it whatsoever.
Yeah.
None.
That was good.
Anyway.
I know you're
Sorry,
angry.
I'm angry about that film. I am.
Well, I mean, then you can go with Prince of Persia.
Or Clash of the
Also,
Titans. The one Middle Eastern character.
both of them.
The one Middle Eastern character that becomes a CGI projected image. And I'm just, are you serious?
Yeah.
But money always moves last. Like we're talking about these are big things for money. Like where we're going to find it right now is we're going to find it on a 16-year-old's YouTube channel. Like, hi, my name's Tyrone, and here I am in space. Whoa! like that's where we're finding it right now because I don't live in a world where I've seen those, but my 7-year-old son will. My 7-year-old son right now is taking in the world around him, and as a second-generation Portuguese kid, as multilingual, bicultural, and all of these things, like he's taking in this world in a way that I didn't get to as a 1985 African-American male. I did not get to take in that world. I still have to fight to keep that door open so he can run through it and I can die a much better person. But I don't get to see that finish line. I just get to work towards it.
Yeah. And it wasn't film, but the only thing I can really think of is the Avatar universe.
Okay.
And we are not going to talk about the film because the film is not a film.
Are we?
No, we're not going to talk about the
Are we
garbage.
talking James
Airbender?
Cameron?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Airbender.
Okay.
Hey,
I was talking about James Cameron.
Last Airbender.
POCs. They are blue.
No, Last Airbender, Legend of Korra. They did it right.
Legend of
Okay.
Korra did it right.
Forever.
Forever
Just
right.
Korra
I
forever.
haven't seen Legend of Korra. Sorry.
I mean, it's the perfect.
Abby, you are failing me. You have failed me for the last time.
I will watch it tomorrow. I promise.
Better. All of it.
Yeah.
I mean,
4
'cause I
seasons.
would like to have a discussion of that too.
It's-
eventually.
I actually liked how they
But-
actually played with the ratios upon the powers and mixing
Yes.
them.
Yes.
And I was like, oh my gosh, we don't just have, okay, the earthbenders are going to be African or these guys are going to
Right.
be Asian. No, they
They're just
mixed
different.
them. They
Yeah.
just
Actually-
mixed them. And I went, oh, this is fabulous.
That's the greatest thing about that show and that whole like universe and series, that whole franchise. The greatest thing about that is if there is such a thing as racism or sexism, those characters are usually just kind of dismissed or made fun of.
Yeah.
And you see
Yes.
different people as
Well,
villains and heroes
The racist
of
ones are the
every
villains,
nation.
actually. In Korra, the
Yes.
one who wanted to be the supreme.
Yes.
Being.
There's so
I
many-
can't say because you haven't seen it now.
You can't tell me.
Yes.
But I'm like,
Yes.
but that was the bad guy.
Right. There are
And
heroes
I'm-
and villains from every nation
yeah.
and from every skin tone.
And the best part was if you go back from Korra just to Avatar, it's the same thing. There are heroes and villains from each one.
Absolutely.
And the transition between separatist ideals to an integrated world in a free state, like,
Yes.
and how that wasn't a paradise. That was
Right.
what was so important
Right.
to me. Is it wasn't like we're all in the city now and it's great. It was something that they were learning, and it was
Yes.
like I was saying, it's a conversation. It's
Yes.
not just a solution.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So can we range from that then? Because that still encompasses POCs in fantasy film, whether it's anime,
It's not anime.
also
Yeah, it's not anime.
but
It's not
but
anime.
the original,
No.
not anime.
They're not
Yeah.
anime.
even the
had-
No, not
cartoon.
anime.
Nope.
That's a cartoon. It's not anime.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
not anime.
correct.
It's this, for me,
There's
it's the
an-
same.
there-
That's like saying block printing is painting. You don't have a marker.
It's not from Japan, and so it's
different culture.
Yes.